So we're going to continue in more or less the same vein and drill down a little bit deeper into the causes and consequences of jail overcrowding, and by return engagement as moderator and to introduce our next stellar panel, we have, once again, Maurice Possley.
I'm going to stall here for just a couple seconds. It looks like we got about half the room. While I talk about our three panelists, it's the Larry, and Kirk show. You're right, the other Larry. I'll start with Sheriff Amerson. Amerson is from Alabama, and I know we have some Alabama represented here. I asked him to come. I actually was connected to Larry through someone else at the National Sheriff's Association, and you were in a position there where you had a very broad view of what was going on in this country. And when it comes to you, that's what I really would like you to sort of talk about as the sheriffs. You know, Judge Leifman talked about the judges being a gatekeeper. I mean, you are literally the gatekeeper, the keeper of the keys. I have Sheriff Taylor from Colorado who said he might go off the rails, and I welcomed him to do that because I think this is a great audience for people to hear directly from the heart as well as the mind of someone who is dealing with this on a daily basis. This panel is designed to talk about consequences of overcrowding, and one of the reasons that I had two people from law enforcement wanted to be on this is that they are going to see firsthand and up close and personal the consequences of their jails being filled beyond capacity. And then our other Larry is a professor from, I gotta find this.
This is a quiz.
I thought it was the University of New Mexico.
No.
New Mexico State.
Yes, we are the university.
That's right. It's like saying University of Montana and Montana State. Yeah. It's quite a difference. He has written extensively about jails. And there's an abstract, which I think will be part of the materials on the resources page at some point, that is just really an outstanding sort of overview of where we started, how jails came to be, and sort of their historic, the arc of time, and how they have changed over time, but retain many, and he's going to start off here and talk a little bit about this, and how they retain many of the sort of old-timey stuff that we aren't even sort of aware of. And that really, I think, the historical perspective that he can bring to this issue is extremely important, especially when you're having this knowledge when you're going out and talking to your local sheriffs and law enforcement and judges and prosecutors and defense lawyers is, I think, very critical. So I'd like you to take away. Yes, please do.
Stand up so I don't go to sleep.
You got in at 3:30 this morning, was that?
For those of you who are hockey fans, I almost pulled off a hat trick yesterday. We were flying out of Albuquerque to Dallas, and there was bad weather in Dallas, which there normally is this time of year. And so we got held up for about an hour and a half in Albuquerque. And so the flight we were supposed to connect with in Dallas was going to JFK. Well, we missed that one. They sent us to another gate, and they said, we can get you to LaGuardia. We got to that gate. That flight was gone, too. So the third one was Newark. So we landed in Newark at 1:40 this morning and got to the hotel at about 3 o'clock after filing a report on missing luggage. My luggage is still in Dallas. The last time I checked, and I actually packed 2 copies of a book that I've written called Essentials of Corrections, which has a whole chapter on jails and local detention facilities. And so if my luggage gets here today, I'll bring a couple of those copies tomorrow, and whoever hits me up first can get one of those, and the rest of you can buy one on Amazon or b/n.com, and I will thank you, and my grandchildren will thank you too. I sent, to show you what, a man who has heart, I sent Maurice a text yesterday, and I said, here's what's going on, and the response I got was, safe travel. Okay. The place,
Not much empathy, right?
No. The place I always start, you see my notes up here. The place I always start with news, people from news media is this, and we've already heard this, but I want to give you the shorthand of it. Jails are not prisons, and prisons are not jails. Please don't confuse those. I had a long, heated discussion with a reporter one time who cited the AP style manual, who said, those words are the same. And I said, no, they're not, and you will spend an eternity in hell for confusing them. I'm one of those people who talks to the TV, and my wife has this tranquilizer dart gun, because I hear these newspaper people, the news media people on the local news, often in Albuquerque, say something like, and so got a 10-year jail term. No, he didn't. He got a prison term. He did not get a jail term. Chris made me feel bad this morning when he talked about working in this area for 3 years, because I've been mucking around in the area of jails, doing research and visiting jails and so forth for about 35 years now. I started when I was 14 years old, and I'll wait. And it's not all A material. In fact, when my daughter was young, she used to tell her friends, "My dad's been in jail all over the country," which was true. Where do we get? Well, local jails, especially small town rural jails, and one of my former colleagues and I, Joel Thompson, did an article in the Journal of Criminal Justice back in the early 80s called Mayberry Revisited. And we looked at the smallest of the small jails. We looked at the jails with rated capacity of 10 inmates or fewer, and there were just over 200 of those. Most folks today, when they talk about rural jails, they use the benchmark of about 100 inmates or smaller. There was some discussion in the earlier panel about rural counties building jails, and they really do it for a couple of reasons. One is because they fill up the jails that they have, and so one of the basic, I think there are 2 basic principles about jail size. Number one is you can't build yourself out of a crowding crisis. It's sort of like the field of dreams. If you build it, they will come. And the second thing about local jails is the shoe tells the foot how big it can grow. What some rural jails have done is some counties have looked at jails as money-making operations, especially as there have been expansions in things like immigration detention and housing federal inmates. I'm going to say something and then I'm going to take it back. What I'm going to say is the federal government does not run jails. What I'm going to take back is that they have what are called metropolitan detention centers or metropolitan correctional centers that are sort of like jails, but in most places in the country, the federal government doesn't run a jail. And so they depend on local counties to run jails, to house prisons. And there have been counties around this country that have built small rural counties, 10,000 population, that have built jails that would house hundreds of inmates because they saw this as clean industry. They saw that there was an opportunity there to house folks for the U.S. Marshal Service or for Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and they thought, we can make money off of this deal by housing inmates. Some of them have been successful at that and generating income. Some of them have found that there's a real problem of overbuilding, and some of them have actually closed down all or parts of new jails they built because they didn't get the population they expected. So whenever we get crowded, I wish I'd brought a picture. There's a big campaign sign in my neighborhood for a guy who's running for magistrate judge in Sandoval County, New Mexico. I live in Sandoval County. We're a suburban community right next to Albuquerque, Bernalillo County. And you can look up this guy's website. I think it's donstoddard.com. And he's got this gigantic sign that's just down the street from where I live. And at the bottom of this, it's got his name, elect Don Stoddard, magistrate judge. And at the bottom, his campaign slogan is, "Criminals don't like conservative judges." Okay? So I looked this guy up, and his background in judicial work is he's a retired FedEx driver, and he's owned a couple of businesses. Now, I'm curious, how many of you are from counties or jurisdictions, they may be multi-county jurisdictions, that have non-lawyer judges? Let me see your hands, okay? In New Mexico, all except Albuquerque and Bernalillo County, all the other counties, the other 32 counties in the state, elect magistrate judges, and the only qualifications are you have to be 18 years old, you have to be able to speak English and write English, and you have to be registered to vote. And so we've got folks in not just in New Mexico but in other states where judges are coming from these backgrounds. They're elected. They apparently want to be reelected, and so quite often they take a really tough attitude toward people who are coming before them in terms of fines and in terms of incarceration and things like that. Jails then suffer from political conservatism in rural counties, but they also suffer from fiscal conservatism. The most common way of funding county services in the United States is through things like property taxes, which are not very responsive to changes in the economy. When the economy goes bad, they don't go down very much. When the economy goes up, they don't go up very much. And so, we tend to fund county services through things like property taxes, which are not necessarily a very efficient way of doing it. The county that I live in, they only reassess property every 10 years. And so that makes it kind of tough to keep up with finances. Rural counties also, as we heard this morning, rural counties also suffer from a lack of support services, whether it's pretrial or mental health or other sorts of issues like that. As a result, we're putting people in county jails, and we're keeping them there, sometimes on incredibly small money bail amounts. We looked at in some of the research that I've done in the past, we've looked at counties where judges would set bail at $250 or $500, and if they use the services of a bail bonding agent, I'm glad you made the distinction between bail and bond. That was always one of my questions on Intro to Criminal Justice. CJ 101, always on one of the exams, there was always a question about the difference between bail and bond. If they use professional bail bonding services and the bondsman charges them a 10% fee, which is not uncommon, they could get out on $25 or $50. I've told jail administrators, you would save money by loaning these people $25. You know, they're costing you $50, $60, $75 a day, and they can't get out for $50. You know, those sorts of issues really plague small jails. Now, one that we're going to hear from a couple of folks who have dealt with this issue, but there's a couple of other things, a couple of other points I want to make before I turn it over to them, and that's this. Traditionally, we inherited from the English the practice of the local sheriff, the county sheriff, running jails. That is not universally true today. In fact, in the state of New Mexico, we got 33 counties in New Mexico. In half the counties, the sheriffs run the jails. In half the counties, there's an appointed jail administrator. Somebody, the county executive, the county judge, the board of supervisors, whatever the body is, appoints a jail administrator, and then that person is responsible for the day-to-day operations, and the sheriff retains constitutional power to do law enforcement in the county. You know, I wouldn't advocate any particular system because I've seen both systems work well and poorly. I talked to one sheriff in New Mexico who was lobbying the county. They had a jail administrator. He was lobbying the county very heavily to take over the jail again. And I asked him, why would you do that? That's like getting a hemorrhoid transplant. Why are you doing this? He said, well, I think I want control of the jail. In California, what happens is this, and I've done research on jails in California. A lot of the sheriffs in California, what they do is when they send their personnel through the sheriff's academy, when they come out, they assign them to the jail usually for the first 2 years because they have a hard time sometimes staffing the jails. And so they will put them in the jail working, not always happy to do that, the deputies, but they'll put them in the jail working for 2 years before they put them out as what some people call a road deputy. You know, that system can work. That system can work. It really makes, in some ways, it makes more sense to me to have somebody who is kind of committed to full-time to jail administration and then keeping the law enforcement operations separate. Although, as I said, you know, either system can work and can work well or poorly. Jails are what you're going to find in working in the news media. Jails can be receptive to your advances, or they can be very skeptical of you. I have found this doing research in jails. A couple of my colleagues and I did. I was telling Judge Lieber from Florida there that I had done research in the women's jail in Dade County, and he said they've closed that jail. We did research back in the 90s in exclusively women's jails in the United States. There were about a dozen of them at the time. Most jails are co-ed facilities. Sometimes the jail administrators are very reluctant for you to come, you know, messing around in their business because they're not sure what you're up to. And so don't expect them necessarily to welcome you with open arms. One of the big problems, especially, I'm going to kind of end on this point and probably not take up all of my time. No? One of the problems that rural jails especially have is inflexibility of space. What law and custom and in some states jail standards, and you guys can talk about jail standards, dealing with those. The law and custom will say that there must be sight and sound separation between males and females and between juveniles and adults. Now, you got to recognize that in some, especially rural counties, juveniles are housed in the adult jails. And there can be problems with that. I'll end with this little short story. I got a call one day from, before I retired, I got a call one day from a lawyer in Pecos, Texas. Anybody from Pecos, Texas? Go down there and buy watermelons and cantaloupes and things down in there. Got a call from a lawyer in Pecos, Texas, and he said, I've got a case that I may want you to be an expert witness on. And I said, what's that? And he said, one of the sheriff's deputies arrested a 16-year-old boy for drunk driving. They brought him to jail. So, okay. And he said, we have to keep sight and sound separation. Said, our jail is small and it's just a long hallway. And so we put this kid in the last cell, and it was one that the county had used for storage. So it had sheets and towels and shower curtains in it. Locked the kid up, came and checked on him the next morning. He was dead. He was hanging. The lawyer asked, do you want to be an expert witness on that? And I said, I'd love to be one. We'll deal with that issue. Jails, especially smaller jails, don't necessarily have good written policies. States may or may not have mandated jail standards that have been developed by the American Correctional Association. And so what you find is that a lot of these jails are doing the best they can with what they have and what they know to do. But that doesn't always mean that they're doing the right thing. And that's where we end up today, talking about the problems of local jails. So I'm going to stop there. Let the sheriffs have their turn.
Thank you. I'd like to hear from your perspective, looking across the country. Okay. When we talk about, seriously, who really wants to run a jail? Is that a legitimate question?
Often.
And what are the consequences that come, and what have you kind of seen as we look into the sort of the issues of the jail overcrowding in the rural areas? Your perspective for journalists who are going to be going back to their jurisdictions and asking questions, and they, from your perspective, I think you can help guide them in what questions would be pertinent and thoughtful.
Well, I'm certainly honored to be here, and I appreciate John Jay College for taking on this endeavor because it's critical. A couple of things in background. I was sheriff for 22 years, and in my tenure, I started working in the jail in 1975. I had worked in a juvenile detention center before that and saw such milestones as used to when you were 16 years old in Alabama, you got arrested, you went to jail. They changed that to 18 years of age, and you say, well, that's an improvement. Unfortunately, in the detention centers for juveniles, that meant where you had small children that you were trying to impact them in a positive way, you now had 16 and 17-year-olds who were generally hardened criminals. And our detention went downward. So those kind of things are out there. Being a sheriff from Alabama, you know, most folks watch Smokey and the Bandit and get a perception of a Southern sheriff. We had Sidney Poitier's movie In the Heat of the Night. We got another perspective of Southern sheriffs. So our bar is pretty low. So hopefully, but the good news for you, I want to tell you that sheriffs in Alabama and across our nation are generally very engaged and positive people who are trying to make positive changes in their community. There's about 3,080 sheriffs in this nation today. The jails across our country, about 80% are run by sheriffs. So I encourage you, if you work in a jurisdiction where there is a sheriff, to get to know them. And you got to have some trust. If you want law enforcement people to talk to you, a lot of reporters say there's nothing that is off the record, and I get it. If I was the sheriff and say something incredibly stupid about what I did or some of my people did, and you say, oh, that's a great story, I think I'll use it. You'll never find that door open again. So I would suggest that you be very cautious, and if they don't bring up that issue with you, you certainly need to, and have some ground rules, because trust is an important factor in communications with your public safety people, especially a sheriff. I got to meet sheriffs from all across the nation. There are some in large jurisdictions, there are some in very small, and of course we're focusing on the small, and there are some common denominators. There's almost never enough money. And what does that mean? In the jail I came from, when I was first went to work there as a jail officer, we kept 60 to 80 inmates. We had one jail officer on shift at any one time, and in the late 70s, state prisons started filling up, and the state, to do what they often do, is they dumped it back on the county. County jails were overcrowded. There were riots in our jail, and in 1986, a new jail opened because of rioting that happened in that jail because of overcrowding. Not anything about the way that it was run locally, but the fact was that inmates wouldn't be taken into the state system as they should have been. They dumped it on the counties. When I was sheriff, we started that again. Today, the Alabama sheriffs, the Alabama jail system is overcrowded terribly. You know why? Because the state prison system is overcrowded. They're at 200% capacity, and federal lawsuits are making their way through the system with those folks come back to the county jail. I checked yesterday in our jail, to give you an idea, the current population is 636 prisoners. When I was a jailer, almost zero females ever came to jail. It was really rare. We didn't even have a female area. Like we talked about with the juvenile, we had to stick them somewhere where they couldn't have contact with the male inmates. Today we have 295 white males in our jail. We have 199 black males. We have 11 other races in the jail for a total of 508. We have 109 white females and 20 black females in our jail today. About 250 of those are state inmates. Our state passed a law that said, gosh, when somebody violates probation or parole, instead of sending them to prison, we shouldn't do that. Let's send them back to the county jail. And now the counties who get no more money, well, we do. State of Alabama pays for each inmate $1.75 a day to house an inmate. And that's feeding them, clothing them, medical, and anything else you might need.
Say that figure again.
$1.75 per day, and that is for food.
A princely son.
Yeah. There was the issue about medical care for the mentally ill. The typical mental patient gets about $2,000 a month cost in medical. A lot of those folks get it free. On our federal law, when you come to jail, you know what happens to that money? Stops. The county picks up that $2,000 a month. As we've talked about, the plight of the mentally ill in jail is really important. It's really a crisis. I was awarded the Open Door Award for our NAMI chapter in 2000 because we try to work with those folks. We try to do what we can, but never, ever forget, the sheriff follows the law. We have places who do shortcuts, and we all have done that, or do informal things that might not be totally by the law, but in general, our job is to enforce the law as a sheriff who does rural patrol and investigations. We arrest people. Often, I always joked, we're not just arresting them, we're rescuing them. If they're addicted to what was crack was the big deal, then gosh, we had meth come along. Now we've got all these other drugs that are just as horrible and just as difficult. Our judges actually started putting very high bonds on people charged with manufacturing meth. You say, that's not fair, that's not lawful. But what they were seeing is often those people with meth charges, by the time they got the first case to a trial, they already had 6 or 7 other pending cases where they had been rearrested on making meth. They're not the smartest folks out there, but they can't stop. I'll give you this example. Our jail is a tobacco-free jail. We say we don't want to make it a fun place, and why do we want to expose other people to the terrible effects of tobacco smoke? Somebody would be in our jail a year, 2 years. We've had people be there 4 years awaiting trial. First thing they say when they walk out the doors, hey man, you got to smoke? My point is, if I cannot overcome tobacco addiction in multiple years separated from it, how am I going to be better with crack cocaine or meth or any of the more powerful drugs that people are dealing with today? So if we don't treat them, they're coming back. We've heard lots of statistics, that we find I can do that, but a BJA study this year shows 5 out of 6 prisoners who've been arrested were rearrested within 9 years. 5 out of 6. Wouldn't be surprised if that 1 out of 6 is probably dead, and that's the reason they didn't come back. So what we're doing is not necessarily working, and certainly the huge amounts of money we spend on incarcerating people, there are other things that we can do, and you have the ability to influence that discussion. I want you to know that in my family, my immediate family, I had 3 young people who have died of drug overdoses. I've seen it. 2 of those 3 had been in my jail multiple times, and I would beg their parents not to make their bond. We say, that's not fair. But when they got out, they went right back to drug use, and they both ultimately died of overdose. The other one died of overdose. He died in a crack house, and he laid on the floor about 3 hours while they cleaned up their drug paraphernalia and did other things. And all these families were good people. They raised their children the best they could in the most positive way they could, but those children made choices that ultimately cost them their life. And I say that because I'm not real sympathetic on drug dealers and those who impact our children. And let me say this, and I think you'll find out from virtually every sheriff in America, we all see it. The sheriffs I've met across this nation, I've been to 45 states and met sheriffs there. I've been going to conferences for 22 years. I was head of the Training and Education Committee for 10 years. I was the jail and detentions for 3 years. I'm still on the board of the National Sheriffs. I talk to people all over. We are all facing these problems. And if we can have a partnership with you to talk about these issues and bring them forward, we're all going to be better for it. You have the ability. And let me say that sheriffs, what is unique about us, I don't work for a county commission as a sheriff. I'm an independently elected official. We can speak. We can lobby Congress. We can lobby our state legislators. But often legislators have no empathy or sympathy for the problems that counties face. In fact, in Alabama, our Constitution is set up where the counties have no authority to raise funds. They can't even pass an ordinance. Many things they cannot do. So we're different in our state, but lots of states have different setups. But ultimately, running the jail is a critical aspect of our job. Watching over those inmates is a critical duty. And as was pointed out, asking to run a jail is not a really sane thing to think about. I was a professional defendant. I got sued many times over jail issues. We literally struck a jury one time, this is before the Prison Litigation Reform Act was passed, over the quality of our toilet paper and our soap. Inmates said that was a condition of constitutional that rose to the level of a constitutional violation, and we had to strike a jury over that. It got dismissed, but we wasted an incredible amount of money dealing with those kinds of issues. But do some places need to be sued? Yeah, probably, yeah. Because are all of us to the level that we should be? Often we are. I am pleased and impressed with the quality of people who hold the office of sheriff in most jurisdictions. But we still got some Jackie Gleasons and some of the other folks out there as well, unfortunately. It's just the truth. But that's where you come in. Fair and honest reporting makes a difference. In our county, the University of Alabama has a relationship with our local paper, and they send new students to the paper, and they put them to work. Where does the new reporter always go?
Crime beat.
The cop beat, right? The crime beat. They come, and they don't know the difference between an indictment and a subpoena. So they come to report on a story about a criminal activity, and they want to know why somebody's in jail or out of jail, and you go through this. So I used to tell our editors at our paper they should pay me for training their reporters, because they sure didn't. They came in the door not having a clue about how criminal justice actually worked, and it was up to them to learn it on their own. So if I get too long, tell me. Okay. So jails across the nation are in crisis. Different states have done different things to address it, and I applaud those that have, but many have not. And the issue about whether someone stays in jail when they shouldn't have or shouldn't stay longer, I agree that that does exist in places. But when you see grandparents raising children, currently I mentioned how many, there's over 100 females in the jail today. Virtually all those females have children. Many of them, nobody's taking care of their children except their parents. Often we have women coming to jail now who are under the influence of drugs, and they're impacting that child's health. There's a lot of unhappiness in some circles that that's true. But if you're addicted, going cold turkey is often not a possibility. So how do you separate them? So we need pretrial assessments. We talked about assessments, different things have been mentioned, but nobody does a social assessment. Does this person have a job? Who's watching their kids? Are they, how are they living? Are they just living wherever they can every night? Women are typically very susceptible to that weakness. A lady can go wherever she wants to, and there's some guy who will take her in. That's a horrible place to be. They're dragging their children with them. Social services in our area are just overflooded, and that's reflected in many places. So who are the people coming to jail? And if you're looking at jail overcrowding, I would ask you to look at who's in jail. That's so rarely looked at. Who's in there? What is their history? We can always find the single bad example where somebody system does not treat fairly, and there may be multiples. But the question is, how did they get there, and then what can we serve them? The judge was very powerful speaker about the need on mental health reform. Alabama, in our state's wisdom, 2/3 of the mental health beds in our state were closed down. 2/3. In Alabama, you can't commit somebody against their will unless they've committed what they call an overt act. They've had to either, I can't just say I want to commit suicide. I have to try. I have to hurt somebody. In my tenure as sheriff, we shot and killed 6 people. Every one of those were seriously mentally ill. Every one of them we had dealt with multiple times. One guy had soaked himself with gas and was flicking his bick. We got him committed. State kept him 90 days and sent him back. He ultimately killed a woman, his girlfriend, her 2 children. The youngest was 18 months old, and an 8-year-old girl. And ultimately that night we shot and killed him. There's a lot of pain and frustration across our nation about law enforcement officers shooting people. Let me tell you what. The human cost in those people that do that, you look somebody in the eye and you point a weapon at them and you shoot them to death and you see that aftermath, that's not lighthearted. I lost multiple deputies who were involved in critical incidents. Had one deputy who had a guy who was going to commit suicide. Family called, he's trying to hang himself. The deputy happened to be close. He got there, the guy had hung himself, but he cut him down. He saved his life. He was so pumped, and everybody was so excited for what he did. Unfortunately, the guy who hung himself the next morning, he went to another city where his fiancee lived, and he shot her to death and committed suicide. That guy is no longer in law enforcement. The girl's family hated him. He told me recently, I ran into him, that the family had finally come to and said, "We forgive you. We were wrong. We blamed it on you, and it wasn't your fault." We lost a good person. He had much pain and will have much pain the rest of his life. That guy that killed the children and the girlfriend, one of our deputies had twin girls at home. When he went in there, the room was dark and the child was laying in the doorway. They didn't know it, so all the deputies that went in the room stepped on the baby's body. That deputy with twin girls, he got out. He said, "Sheriff, well, I know we did it right, but I can't do it again." So I was glad to see where some communities are doing post-traumatic stress for law enforcement, because it's real and it matters, and it's not just a local issue. It's not just a local issue. It affects us all. And so often, again, the focus is on that somebody used force. Split-second decision changes your life forever, one way or the other. Read some statistics where it said that about 10% of the officers who use deadly force come out of it without negative impact. So that means 90% do. I've had a deputy commit suicide. Left 2 kids behind. And we missed the signs, so I'll get to live with that the rest of my life. So you have the opportunity to be the change driver. But I beg you to look at it the broad picture. I beg you to consider the fact that the people who are trying to enforce the law, we're trying to do it right, the vast majority of us. And those that aren't, it's your job to point that out. And you'll find most sheriffs are willing to open the door if there's a level of trust. Because if I let you in the jail, the first thing inmates are going to tell you, "They treat me awful. This place is lousy. The food's awful. For $1.75 a day, we can't do all that good." But they're in jail because a crime was committed. And if we're going to change the justice system to see if they can get out, that takes state legislation. Very few jurisdictions really have control over that. It's our states that drive it. So look at the laws that dictate how we do business. A couple of folks talked about bail bondsmen. I really consider them a lower life form. They suck on people. They suck on these folks. They suck their money right out. They make friends with people in jail, and I come in jail for DUI. There's some inmate pulling on my sleeve saying, "They call Bubba. Bubba will get you out cheap." Most folks charge 10%. He'll get you out for 8%. And like I said, they sign a contract. The family's hooked, and if I fall behind in my payments, we have a provision where you can put them back in jail. So often they come dragging them back in jail because they couldn't make their payment. They're not supposed to do that, but that's what they do. There needs to be another way of assessing people, like I said, but it needs to be a broader assessment. But if I'm innocent until proven guilty, as our Constitution demands, it's difficult to pry in my personal life, and there's going to need to be some fundamental changes that allow some of that to happen. I would suggest this. Some people might find this critical. Some person gets busted for pot or some small amount of drugs. Why aren't we assessing them early in their drug life? Pot is known as a great gateway drug. Some of these other drugs, same thing. If we just continue to dismiss the case, no big deal, go right on, and they progress if they do, we had an opportunity to intervene. And we're missing that opportunity to do that. And again, I talk to sheriffs all over the country who are dealing with these kinds of issues. I'm glad we got a sheriff from Colorado here to talk to you about some of the things they have to deal with. But we need a big social net, and that's not cool and it's not popular. Nobody wants to have empathy for a criminal, even my citizens. If you had your house broken into and your grandmother's wedding band and your grandfather's old shotgun were stolen and you never got it back, they're not really sympathetic. They say lock them up and keep them there. There's all the statistics about that. And you can see why people feel that way. In treatment, the average person in treatment relapses 5 to 7 times. So if you're out and you relapse, there has to be a way to assess that and evaluate that and try to keep them there. In our state, we have all these fly-by-night rehab places that provide treatment, make money. They get these people a job, and a certain percentage of their money has to go to the rehab. They make them give them their money they get for food stamps. That goes to them for the food. They suck them dry any way they can, all in the name of being getting drug rehab. So it's our problem. It's a problem with national scope. California celebrated a victory. They had a huge prison population, and they turned them out. Talk to law enforcement in California and see what their jail populations are doing. Those offenders are reoffending, and they're coming back. I can't tell you that there's a surge, but if you talk to the guy on the street, the people who are actually out there doing the law enforcement, those folks said, "Ooh, I got a reprieve." Did we do anything to change them while they're in custody? No, we warehouse them. So when they get back out, kind of like the person smoking, do you think their life's going to change? And most of the time, no. So I painted a lot of grim things here, but I wanted you to know that with the folks with the boots on the ground, the folks that are seeing the cost, the folks that are seeing the suicides from drug offenders and those who have all these psychiatric things. I didn't mention that many of the people who have psychiatric problems today are created by excessive drug use. When you use a lot of meth or a lot of crack or some of these other drugs, you become mentally unstable. So they need that treatment, and they need treatment while we got them localized and where we can do something about it. In our county, we're the only county in Alabama, our mental health officer is a licensed counselor, and we got a local bill passed, unfortunately based on the tragedy of this family getting killed. But the good news is we now have some meaningful ways to address that. So it makes a difference in that regard. So I applaud you for your choice in a career. Like us, you don't get paid much. Like us, you're rarely appreciated for what you do. And like us, you care about the communities that you serve. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Sheriff Taylor, has, I want you to answer 2 questions.
Sure, you got it.
Every conference needs a good storyteller, first of all, and so we've got one here in Sheriff Taylor. You are a lawyer.
No.
Well, you have a JD.
I have a law degree. I hate to be called a lawyer.
Okay. I was wondering how many sheriffs in this country have law degrees, though.
Not too many.
That's what I thought. What is the Triple Crown accreditation? One of only 4 sheriffs to have received this.
Triple Crown accreditation is an accreditation given by the National Sheriff's Association that identifies agencies that have their Law Enforcement Bureau, CALEA accredited. So that's Colorado, Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement. That's your law enforcement guys, the guys you see out on the street from the sheriff's office that catch the bad guys. And your jail accredited, which is the American Correctional Association, ACA. And then also your medical within your jail is also accredited, which is NCCHC.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So you were elected sheriff in 2006, and
I was 6'4", 215. I was a beautiful man. They're talking about PTSD and all that stuff. Look at me. Look at 12 years.
So was your jail overcrowded then?
It was at maximum capacity, yes.
So give us the arc of what's gone on in the last 12 years.
All right. You got it.
And do it in about 16 minutes.
You got it. I'll do it even quicker than that. I want to talk about what they want to talk about. I've never been in a room with media that's been this quiet. Usually they're, hey, sheriff, hey. So you are like not the CEO's best friend, but I love the media. I feel I've always, since I started, decided that the media is the police, and the police are, you are our citizens, and that's the way I look at it. I don't have a chance to get to all my citizens in my community or across the state, but you do. You have that ability. So I've always felt that way. So I'm going to give you we're going to do a quick case study just so to get you familiar with Pueblo County. Number one thing that I'll tell all media is do yourselves a favor and do a quick civics lesson wherever you're reporting. Sheriffs in the West are not anything like sheriffs in the East. West of the Mississippi, they kind of break it down by strong sheriffs. The Alabama sheriffs are very strong. Strongest sheriffs in the United States are the Louisiana sheriffs. They can even call for a tax. Imagine that. Second strongest sheriffs are probably the Western sheriffs as far as what their roles and responsibilities are. But we're also very accountable to our public. So anyway, we're going to do a quick case study. This is my jail. The elephant in the room, I love pretrial services. We're operating on a pretrial service. I love what the judge said about mental health. His percentages, if you're looking at Pueblo County, are totally wrong. We're about 38% diagnosed, either Axis 1 or dual diagnosis on mental health in my jail. 38. Sometimes we've been and we have the Colorado Mental Health Institute Pueblo in my town. So this is a quick case study, and we'll flip through these because I want to get to some questions here. Let's go through. So this is my jail here. The tower over here on the right, originally designed to hold 19 females. 19 females were originally designed in the tower. They call that the Taylor Tower, or some call the Tower of Doom. So that's the tower on the right, and then on the left is the dormitory. Its design capacity is 509. My average daily population is 737. I'm the highest overcrowded jail in the state of Colorado. Have been for some time. Go ahead. So this is the death by PowerPoint you got here. So I did my own pretrial services before I met Sherry in 2006 and 7. I was like, why are we full? Well, it turns out there was a lot of different reasons that didn't have anything to do with what my job was. We were holding everybody. We were holding technical violators for parole. We were the punitive seg for community correction. So community correction gets hot UA, they go over to the jail, and the previous sheriff would hold them there. They can be held up to 15 days before their hearing, and then they'd be smacked on the wrist and sent back to community corrections. And so I had a huge population. So I went through and I identified all these populations and started throwing them out of the jail. I said, I don't legally have to hold these folks for you. I'm not going to hold them. So you'll see when we get to my numbers. Go ahead. You can read it. So here's how my trend line has gone since 2005, 2006. So you can see down in 2008, that's Kirk Taylor's pretrial services before I met Cherry and knew what it was. So I started throwing everybody out of the jail that didn't need to be there. And I got down to 476. I thought we hit the lottery. That didn't last very long, as you can see, and you can go up to today's count, and you can see how we are. This is just kind of the capacity when we first started in 19. As of today, I got 184 females. I showed you the dormitory there. If you go back in jail history across the United States, you can see everybody wanted to go towards the dormitory style. Everybody, let's put them in dorms. We can put more people in there. We can assess their risk score, and we can spread them out. We can hold more people in with less supervision. So that's a direct supervision model. I actually have a deputy inside that dormitory, 1 to 80 inmates. The problem is that it's designed for low-risk inmates, right? And so along comes pretrial services, along comes common sense, what I call it. Along comes common sense and say, hey, we shouldn't be. Here comes research that says if you incarcerate low-risk offenders, they're 70% more likely to recidivate. Duh. So let's get them out into the community where they can keep their jobs, they can keep their families going, all these things. So what happens across the country is all these low-risk inmates through the courts and through systematic changes within the criminal justice system, they start bleeding them out of the jails. Well, our jails, at least my jail and a lot of jails, are designed to keep low-risk inmates. They're not designed to have attempted murderers and murderers that are high risks of. We have a risk system, and most people do 1 through 8, 1 being the most risk and 8 being the least risk. So dormitories in that scale are designed for 6, 7s, and 8s. Well, through pretrial services, if it's robust enough, and we have a very robust one in Pueblo, although we have problems with it I'll talk to you about later. If you have 6, 7s, and 8s, and you're identifying them to get them out of jail and into community, what are you left with? Your 1 through 5s who are now occupying a dormitory setting. That's a problem, right? So now you got these high-risk inmates who need to be in a cell awaiting pretrial, and now they're in this dormitory 80-1 on your deputies. Oh, and then by the way, you ask the commissioners for more people, and they say, nah, we're good. Okay, keep going. Jail, I can't agree with you more. Stop calling jails prisons. We're not prisons. We're not designed to be prisons. We're taking on all of our states. The elephant in the room we didn't talk about today, and I don't know if you're going to get to it, and I don't know if we have any legislatures in there. I don't care. The legislature's killing us. They're absolutely killing the counties. I have a list of 50 legislative changes over the last 12 years in the state of Colorado that have deferred state prison inmates to the county jails. Now, here's your riddle at media, and you guys love riddles. I know you do. Here's your riddle. I will show you a stagnant jail population, stagnant arrests, not jail population. I will show you over a 20-year period in Pueblo, America, a stagnant arrests. About 9,000, 9,300, right in there. For 20 years, we've been arresting and booking 93 to 9,500 people in the community of Pueblo County for 20 years. I can also show you a pretty stagnant line, with the exception of a couple bleep years, on crime in Pueblo, America. And that line is going to show you stagnant. So if crime has not increased and our bookings have not increased, why is my population almost doubled in my jail? Now, if you can answer that question, you could go on the tour and start speaking. Go ahead. We're not prisons. So this is what got it all started. If you know the 137, you can go to the next one. Litigation in California really spawned all this, and everything comes west. Colorado goes with California, unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it. So it ended up 137% prison population in California. Out comes this big Supreme Court decision that says, hey, you can't do that. You got to start dumping them out. So they did. So they figured out ways through the legislature. That came to Colorado. Over a period of time, it's resulted in overcrowding in our jail population in not only Pueblo but across the state. We're 157% over capacity. Where's the feds that are suing us? You know, I've talked to the ACLU. I've invited the ACLU to my jail, right? There's a gal from Colorado Public Radio. I've invited them down, right? I'll tell you what, if I put the 10 Commandments out in front of my jail, they'd sue me tomorrow, right? But they won't come look at my jail for overcrowding. You can go to the next one. So some of this legislation, I'll give you, I have a list of all 50 if you're interested. So some of this legislation has taken felonies that were normally going into DOC and reclassifying them as misdemeanors. I heard someone say 1 year in the county jail is the longest sentence you can have in the jail. Not true. In Colorado, it's 2 years. So they just changed that statute. They said no longer is it 1 year incarceration in the jails. It's 2 years. Guess what they did last year? Denver County has a sentenced inmate in the jail that is sentenced to 12 years Denver County jail. 6 2-year consecutive sentences. Gilpin County is going to do the same thing. They've got somebody in there for 16 years, 8 consecutive 2-year sentences. So when I tell you jails aren't prisons, when he tells you jails aren't prisons, that's what I'm talking about. We already pay our state taxes and our local taxes. I can't believe $1 something in Alabama. That's nuts. We get $56.50. Woohoo! It's about 3/4 of what it costs to hold a state inmate. I don't hold any. DOC comes, get them out of here. I'm one of the guys that wants to go chain them to the prison. This is your responsibility, state. They're deferring their responsibility onto the counties. They came down 6 years ago to my county, and 8 years ago, I think it was. I was a baby sheriff. I was still tall. I had a nice head of hair. And, that's my wife. She'll tell you. So they came down and they said, look, at that time they had closed 3 prisons in the state of Colorado. 3. They later closed 2 more. So they'd closed 5 prisons in the state of Colorado. Had crime gone down? No. But they changed all these laws, increased the amount of parolees. If you wanted to go to work for parole in the state of Colorado, they were hiring. They were hiring all of our deputies. Everybody was getting out of prison. Okay? Legislature passed all these laws, increased the parole at the state level. Now all these people are on parole. We had 11 officer-involved shootings last year in Pueblo and Pueblo County. Over 50% of those shootings were done by parolees. So they're dumping these people out of prisons, and they're ending up in their jails, or they're shooting our cops. And I'll stand by that statement. I'll give you the numbers. Go ahead. These are just some of the examples. There's a ton of them. Either directly or indirectly have dumped people out of state prisons, and they have ended up in our county jails. They used the community approach. We talked a lot about mental health, and I think it's fantastic. We have one of the most robust mental health. We're doing something nobody in the nation is doing in my jail. We give Vivitrol shots to our addicts in my jail. Waiting to get sued on that one. Nobody comes. I'm going to put the 10 Commandments out so they can come in. All right? We give Vivitrol shots. We have such a robust reentry program to reconnect with community. We're tying in with all our community mental health. The problem is, just what they said, they're not funded. The other big problem is they're not receiving Medicaid. So these are all unfunded mandates that have been given to the sheriffs. Some sheriffs do them good. Some sheriffs don't do them so good. I got to tell you, I got a fantastic staff. They're incredible. Go to the next one. That's that California Brown, governor of California. This is Colorado. This is just, and I'll give you this.
He said with contempt.
You can give it to him, yeah. Go ahead. Okay, these are the booking numbers I was telling you about. Our booking numbers are stagnant. And I already showed you what our ADP is, right? Average daily population. Go to the next one. In fact, we got them down. Not only are we stagnant, we got them down a little bit. Booking, see, this was the riddle I just gave you. And these are just some questions to ask yourself. So is it poor socially economic ability to make bond? That we talked about that on pretrial services and those types of things from the judge. Inability of the judicial to make discretionary judgments. I think that's a big part of it. Sorry, Judge. More people in violation of more laws. We know that's not true. Pueblo just has more people that need to be locked up. And there's a whole bunch of people in Pueblo that need to be locked out. But a lack of transitional non-custodial programs to assist the public feel safe. That's a big one we kind of touched on a little bit. If somebody burglarizes your house and steals all your stuff that Sheriff spoke about, you don't want to see him in line with you at the Walmart. He gets arrested yesterday on identity theft, goes through the CPAT on the pretrial services, is deemed through evidence-based, research-based data to not be a threat, shouldn't be in jail. You just filed your identity theft report. You just arrested Joe Smith, and then the next day he's behind you in line at Walmart. Kind of feel re-victimized. And so there's some of that going on. That lends to the resistance of some of the issues that are happening in the courts as well. But so this is what I've identified as part of the riddle, is identifying the average length of stay. The average length of stay. So as you can see, I mean, I've been wild trying to figure out this jail puzzle, right? To get my, I've embraced pretrial services. I've embraced mental health diagnostics, and I've hired more people. We have a reentry program that's very robust. All my guys, if they haven't, will be CIT trained. We've been having the CIT program for years and years in my jail first and on the street. So we're really on the cutting edge of all this stuff, yet I can't get this down. So you identify the average length of stay. And that's really something from a media standpoint that you can look up, you can find. The average length of stay in the state of Colorado is about 16.9 days. And this is the average length of stay before first judicial proceedings. In Pueblo, America, it's at 30 days. If you go into an individual who's either Axis 1 or co-occurring diagnosis for mental health, it's running in the 60s. And we have a mental health judge, 60%. And so, 60 days. So these people are staying there longer, based a lot. So then as a sheriff, I'm like, okay, how do I fix that? Because I'm a fixer, right? I can't fix it. The district attorney is dragging his feet. The judges are kicking the can down the road. Anybody comes in, wants a continuance, as the judge say, sure, no problem. Well, it is a problem because they're staying in my jail. It's not that they can't make bond. Sometimes it is, because we have a pretty robust pretrial services program. Let me just kind of give you that caveat. So we have a great in 2013, I think it is, the 1236 comes out. There's a House Bill 1236 comes out in about 2013. And this is my gripe on the judiciary. In 2013, House Bill 1236 comes out. House House Bill 1236 tells the chief judges of every judicial district in the state of Colorado, you will have a pretrial services program. Never existed before, unless you count Kirk Taylor's pretrial services. And says you will do that. Now, if a judge or a judicial district or judges across the state were given a mandate by the legislature on a sentencing provision, that would have been implemented in every judicial district within the state, any state, immediately upon when it came to fruition, right? If all of a sudden DUI went from probation to 1 year prison, right, and they passed that law, January the 1st, if you got a DUI after January the 1st, you go to prison for 1 year. That's as an example. 2013, House Bill 1236 was passed. We only have 6, maybe 8 jurisdictions in the state that are actually doing pretrial services. It's a travesty. And the judiciary will not step up to the plate. 8 judicial districts, Judge, are doing fantastic. They're awesome. But I got to tell you, but if it was anything else, right? If it was a sentencing provision, right? Boom, it'd be right in there. It would have been done. Everybody goes to pretrial services. For the first time in my law enforcement career, we had a hammer on the judges. Whoa, it was cool. And the judges said, nah, no money in it, we ain't doing it. Right? And I'm a chief judge. Who's going to tell me to do it, right? That's what's happening with pretrial service. But I'm telling you, she's beating us over the head. It's coming. It's coming. The other part that's a problem with pretrial services, because everybody thinks that's the answer. I tried to build a new jail. My jail's 40 years old. The life expectancy of a jail is 35 to 40 years. Mine's 40 years old. But the place is crumbling. The assessment for the plumbing, in fact, these other sheriffs in Colorado said, Kirk, how in the hell did you get Triple Crown accreditation? They literally told me that because of my physical plan. My plumbing, only to fix my plumbing, $4.5 million. Right? So I do a tax provision. I do a sales tax to build a new jail, which we desperately need. Regardless of this conference or overcrowding, we desperately need a new jail. ACLU comes out with an op-ed against it. You don't need a new jail. You need a robust pretrial services program. I have one. Right? Now, I know other jails that don't. Again, that's where the Ten Commandment thing came to. So your average length of stay is a big one. It's huge. So don't just go with average dated population, because you can cut those. I stopped taking municipal offenders. I was anti-law enforcement as a sheriff. You're affecting public safety, sheriff, because you won't take any of these municipal offenders. Well, they're low-level offenders, and I don't legally have to take them. Big legal battle, Judge. I was like, yeah, I know the law. I don't have to take them. I don't take any municipal offenders. I take 10 parole beds. That's it. I don't take any DOC people. So what have I not done? I can't prosecute them faster. Can't make the judges not give continuances. You can't make a judge do anything they don't want to do. So those are really the frustrations of a sheriff. So keep going. Policy influences the best. I got to tell you, I had to write that down, Judge. The criminal justice system is a repository for failed public policy. It's the best quote I've heard in years. That's absolutely true. But there's only so many things a sheriff can affect. The problem is we're very accessible because we work for the people. We can't even get along with our chiefs. Chiefs of police, don't kid yourself. Chiefs of police and sheriffs don't get along, right? Because they don't answer to the people. They answer to one person, the mayor, or depending on what form of government you have, they answer to the mayor, they answer to a city manager. We don't get along. You know what they have chiefs? I've had chiefs say, our job, in public, our job is to arrest people. Now, if you don't think the system's broke when a chief of police says that, it's not a repository for failed public policy. It's a rock tumbler. You ask, that's what we call it, on the street, where the rubber meets the road. Because I'm a practitioner. I do this every single day. Every day I talk to my jail warden. Every day I talk to my undersheriff, and we try to devise ways to decrease the pressure on our jail for our people. Every day. Not at a conference, not theoretically. I don't do research, although I do research. Almost said doo-doo. So, hey, you guys are awake. All right, keep going. Public policies. So here's an in-custody report. So pretrial services, again, when we sold it to Pueblo County, America, my good friend Stan Hilke was in Mesa County. He was a sheriff over there. He was doing a fantastic job. He was working with Sherry, and they were doing incredible things in Mesa County. So we adopted it. And we were going along. We were doing good. And so as I rolled out, even though I never said this, the press picked up and says, oh, this is going to be the answer to our overcrowded jail in Pueblo, America. And I kept having them tell them, whoa, wait a minute. This is not, the purpose of pretrial services is not to decrease the amount of people in your jail. That's not it. That is a byproduct, you hope, right? Because if you identify people who don't belong in jail and you take care of the bonding and bail practices and stuff, then that will happen, but that is not the primary purpose, right? So I kept having to tell them that, And so when we did, so this pre-sentence felonies and pre-sentence misdemeanors would be, so pre-sentence felonies would have been, these are the good guys that have money and can get out. It would have probably been 48%, and pre-sentence misdemeanors would have been like 49%. So what it's designed to do is take and find the people that are supposed to be in jail through your assessments. It's supposed to find the ones through the CPAT and all the other tools for pretrial service. It's supposed to identify those people who are a risk to public safety, right? So if you take that to its logical conclusion, you want to identify the bad guys that are going to hurt people or hurt themselves or hurt the community, keep them in jail. And the low-risk people, you want to get out on some kind of supervision. But that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to decrease your population. You're going to change your population. And as you can see from Pueblo County's example, we changed our population very well. Problem is our physical plant is not designed to hold the change. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, I think I'm just about done here. So Colorado parolees are killing us. I thought I put these in here for you guys as media folks. So this is some articles that have written. Colorado parolees lack supervision, leads to repeat crimes, dangerous, unprepared, inadequately supervised parolees roam our streets. That's from the Denver Post. It's true. Next. Half of the suspects in the officer-involved shootings on parole or probation at the time of the shooting. That was just on July 2nd. So this isn't old news. PuebloChieftain.com. Next. Pueblo Chieftain, top story. Court-ordered mental test swamp Colorado Mental Health Institute of Pueblo. We've sued the state hospital as sheriffs, and we're going to get ready to sue them again. Right? But in the meantime, the day-to-day stuff, they're still in our jails. And they don't belong in our jails. They never belonged in our jails. We are doing a repeat. It's like I've seen this movie before of the mental health decentralization in the states to community mental health. They're doing the same thing with jail populations. Because, why? This is my mantra, the only ones that can't say no are sheriffs. We're the only ones that can't say no. We have a court order by a judge, mental health judge in Pueblo, America. Go pick up Joe Citizen, take him to the state hospital at this date and time. My deputies go pick up Joe Citizen, court order, drive him to the Colorado State Mental Health Institute, Pueblo. They say, we got no beds, can't take them. What? The judge signed right here. Not taking them. Where do they end up? Jails. Last case study, and then I'll get out of your way and answer questions. But a young lady, civil commitment, mental health civil commitment from Colorado Springs, our neighbor to the north. I'm just south. My county is just south of Colorado Springs. She's civil commitment, Colorado Springs, El Paso County, comes to the state hospital. she assaults her doctor. This is how she assaults her doctor. She slapped him. She slapped her doctor. She was arrested by the Mental Health Institute police. Affidavit was done, brought to the jail, booked into the jail. She was in my jail for just short of 6 months. We filed every piece of paperwork that we could with our county attorney to get her reevaluated. At about the 3-month spot, we finally were successful in getting her reevaluated by the Mental Health Institute Pueblo, because they had refused to take her and evaluate her again. So we picked her up from our jail, which we got really good at. We're very good at what we do. My folks are amazing. I'm an idiot, but they're great. So they get her stabilized, and they take her back over to we got an order finally. Take them back over for reevaluation. She was gone from my facility for 20 minutes. She was picked up in my intake. She was driven to the Colorado State Mental Health Institute Pueblo. She was taken into an office to be reevaluated by who? The same doctor she assaulted. Said, no, she's not ready. Back in my jail. In the meantime, the family dropped the civil commitment. So now she's not even on a civil commitment to the state hospital. She's just in my jail. She spent 8 months in my jail before all the charges were dropped by the district attorney. That's 240 days. I could give you a list of cases like that. That's what you got, case studies like that. Those are the things that the media needs to bring to light, because those are travesties. That should not be happening in your community, should not be happening in my community. And those are the human interest stories that are going to pique the public's response to say no more. This can't go on anymore. It's more than just jail populations. This is about people. My brother spent over 1.5 years in the jail that I now run as a schizophrenic, organic schizophrenia, 19 years old. And I saw what it does to a family. And I see what it does to a community. So for me, this is very, very personal. Get, as media folks, because you guys are bulldogs. I can't believe you're still sitting here quietly, right?
We're taking questions
we fight.
in a minute.
And yeah, we fight. I mean, as the CEO of a law enforcement agency, God, the press is here. Oh, I got to put on a disc. Oh, I hate that. But I got to tell you, we want to tell you the truth. We want to tell you what's going on. Ask the right question. We can't lie. All right? So that's all I have. I have a lot more. I'm going to be around forever, hopefully. I keep trying to get unelected, but anyway, I'll take some questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. I'd like to open it right up for questions. I think what we're hearing here is that sheriffs have the power to be some of the best advocates in their jurisdictions if enlisted in the right way. And one of the things that he just talked about with the anecdotes, those are the things that have the power to move people, especially if you can back it up with the right statistics, that so that you can avoid being accused of cherry picking a couple of interesting stories to try to make a point. With the right data, those stories really have power.
So we can go a bit longer with questions if you try to keep them short and to the point. So, hands, questions? Yes.
I'm going to say something real quick. I'm going to say something while he's getting there with the microphone. I forgot to mention, I've got cards if any of you want to know how to contact me, see me after this. I'm starting a campaign to do away with the word overcrowded. A jail is crowded or it's not crowded. It's kind of like death or pregnancy. You either are or you're not. Yeah, you know, your jail is either crowded or it's not crowded. And many of them are crowded. That's my personal campaign.
Okay.
I'm Amy Yerkinen, and I'm from AL.com in Alabama. And I'm just curious, with the opioid epidemic and all that, I know sending a lot of people to jail, what are some of the big obstacles with providing drug treatment, say methadone or Suboxone? I know you said Vivitrol in a jail facility.
Here we go.
We can have maybe just one person answer that. We can go on to the next question.
Okay, I'm glad you asked that question because I didn't touch on opioids. So we are part of a LEAD program, Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion. And this really tied back to jail populations as well. So we put together criteria for this LEAD program, which mirrors the program that they have in Seattle, as well as the program they have in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Different takes on it, whether or not it's been successful. But at any rate, we have 4 jurisdictions in Colorado, Pueblo being one of them, for this LEAD program. The opioid, so we had to put together criteria. Law enforcement had to put together criteria. The district attorney, the chief of police, and the sheriff, myself, put together criteria for what would be diverted versus what would be sent through the DA's office to the courts. There was some legal wrangling that we had to do with that, the DA in particular. When we finished that criteria, which is very restrictive in Pueblo because we didn't really have the buy-in from the chief of police or the DA. But when we finally put that very conservative requirements for the LEAD program in Pueblo, America, I took that and I gave it to my jail warden. And I said, go upstairs, just the females. I had 168 at that time. I said, go upstairs, go through their files and find out how many of these female inmates that I currently have in my jail would meet this criteria. Anybody want to guess how many? 42. So I have 42 females. This is just the females. 42 females in my jail that meet the restrictive requirements to be law enforcemently diverted. And they're sober. So here's the problem. I go to the mental health and the substance abuse folks, and I say, hey, I got your clients right here. I went to the legislature. I said, we have them all in our jails. Yeah, well, our grants aren't meant for that. You know why? Because they're not eligible for Medicaid. Because they won't come into our jails and take the people that we've sobered up, that we've done all the hard work for. We've decomped them. We've withdrawn them. We've given them Vivitrol. We're giving them counseling. No money in it. Hope that answers your
Okay, next question. No hands.
They're overwhelmed.
I'm Kyle Looker from the Centerville, Iowa Daily Iowegian down in southeastern Iowa. Just want to touch first on the retired sheriff's remarks. It's not actually AP style that the jail and prisons are. So that reporter was definitely wrong. Yeah, you're right. The reporter is definitely wrong. So I apologize on behalf of journalism. But you touched on mental health patients or people with mental health diagnoses. They're in your jail significantly longer. What are kind of the confounding reasons as why? Is it continuances in court? Is it just the normal everyday run-of-the-mill paperwork stuff?
A combination. One, a lot of those folks wind up being charged with very serious offenses. From the prosecutor's perspective, they don't want to look sympathetic that this guy who may have killed several people or done something horrendous, we don't want to see him get committed to a mental institution for an indeterminate number of years. So they don't push that forward. Then what you wind up is they stay in your jail. We've had people stay 6 or 7 years because they can't resolve their case. And it happens all the time. Unfortunately, the people that could have had intervention early on, they don't, as I already mentioned. So we wind up with those people there, and nobody has the political courage to say we're going to do something to handle this case because you got a lot of angry family members who would speak up.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The other thing, as much as I love to throw the judiciary under the bus, when you have it's a system failure. And so when you have specialty courts, like the judge here has a specialty court, a mental health court, we have a mental health court, it takes longer. And you just, the system stretches out. So to get a competency eval, or even to get a psych eval, even if it's that small, It just takes longer because those are specialty and they're very complex. Not everybody's a schizophrenic. Not everybody's depressed. So I can't even throw the judiciary under the bus. Darn it. It's a system failure. And it's very complicated. It's a complex system.
The criminal justice system in the United States is designed to be inefficient. It operates at 3 levels and 3 big divisions of police, courts, and corrections, and it's inefficient. If you look at the number of police agencies in the United States and the number of 1,500 prisons and 51 prison systems and the 3,000 plus jails, it's an inefficient system. So it may not even be a system.
Well, it's incredibly fragmented, and you look at 3,000 counties, and you start to break everything down and all these different jurisdictions. And I think one of the messages that's coming through, Judge Leifman, is the you need unity. You need a unified approach and what I'm hearing here, and I'm encouraged by it, is that sheriffs can be the drivers.
Hey, my name is Eric Jankowicz. I'm reporting in Pittsburgh. And just going along with what you guys are talking about now about system failure and sheriffs being like engines of change, like, is there any like pushback within the policing community against like being those systems of change and just, you know, cops being like, well, we don't get paid enough to do this. We got into this just to write tickets and, you know, maintain the peace and law and order. And is there sort of like, I don't know, like a belief within there that there should be some other government apparatus that takes care of like domestic violence and stuff like that?
Well, there's a lot of apathy in a lot of police agencies. That's one of the reasons why sheriffs wind up being people motivated to try to get change, because we see both sides. We're running the jail. All the felonies come to the county jails, virtually every state in our nation. So we get the worst of the worst. We get those people over and over again. You know, if you do the same thing over and over again, what's the definition of insanity? So we're all insane because we're not fixing it. I applaud our friends in Florida for realizing that and doing something. But most law enforcement officers they got in jobs to help people by arresting criminals, by making our streets safer. The way you make them safe, you get them off the street. And there's often this very narrow view. And again, running a jail and seeing the families of the inmates, you begin to understand you got to look at it as a broader perspective. I never thought I'd be an advocate for the mentally ill. I never thought I'd be an advocate for finding ways to do jails differently. I never thought I would have that perspective when I went into this profession, but I found out that that's what we're supposed to do. We're elected by the people to serve them.
Yeah, there's a lot of pushback from some law enforcement, at least in my area. You know, they don't want to have a hug-a-thug program in the jail. They want to be hard on crime, even from district attorneys. So I'll just tell you how it is. Here's what happens. Municipalities, and if you live in a state where you have a municipality and a county, municipalities are all about making money to run their municipality. That's why they have city courts, right? And that's why they have their own code of municipal codes and crimes that they teach their law enforcement officers to write the city ticket first. Right? So they write the city ticket first. So the city ticket goes into the municipal court, and the fines and costs are absorbed by the municipality. Has nothing to do with the sheriff. We run the county jails in a lot of cases, in the majority of cases. And so if the case is, supposedly, if the case is serious enough, they should come to the county jails. Now, in my municipality, in my community, I stopped taking municipal prisoners 3 years ago, and they went over backwards because I was their enforcement arm. And the only thing I told them back is like, well, if it's that egregious of a charge or a crime or a public safety risk, then file them in state court, and I'd be glad to take them. Well, they don't want to do that because the municipalities don't get the money, right? So follow the money. Answer all your questions.
follow up with that one thing. In Alabama, a county commission gets $8 if someone's convicted for DUI. They pay a whole lot more money than that. But if there's a municipal case, they get hundreds of dollars. They get all the fine money. So they have that money incentive. They'll tell you it's not, but it is. And counties really don't have that incentive to push that, so people on the county level get arrested for DUI generally are a threat to people.
My name is Mitch Riles. I report for a weekly paper in Spokane. For the professor, I'm wondering if you've done any research specifically on jails, tribal jails, or jails on reservations. There's a pretty significant native population where I work.
Yeah, the first answer is no, I have not. And part of the reason for that is until maybe about 10 years ago, the Bureau of Justice Statistics was doing relatively little to collect information on tribal jails. They have started to do some of that. Having looked at those data, I am suspicious based on their incompleteness. Is that a subtle way to say that? A lot of the tribal officials, and some of them qualify as, small rural governments. They're not always forthcoming with some of the information that they have. And so if you got a big tribe like the Navajo that spread out over the whole Four Corners area, you may get reasonable information from them, but they've got facilities scattered all over that reservation. And so I'm not sure that the tribal jail information is today where it needs to be to draw a lot of very good conclusions. Ask BJS about that.
Hi, my name is Elisa Zhu, and I'm a reporter with the Springfield News Leader. It's in Springfield, Missouri. I had a question for Sheriff Taylor. You mentioned that you had stopped taking municipal inmates. How long ago was that, and how did the municipalities respond? What are they doing now?
I want to say it's about 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. I'm going to say 4 years ago. Oh, they hated me. I got a letter from the city attorney saying how I was adversely affecting public safety, and I was the devil, and I was liberal, and I was like, yeah, well, then throw me out. But the law says I don't have to take them. It was another, the Vera Institute actually went to my friend's jail down in Alamosa County, and he did the same thing. And I think Adams County's done the same thing. There's been some jails across the state who said, look, we can't do this anymore. We don't have the room. There is no room at the inn. And so we all have real reasons, both practical and philosophically, to do that. I wish all the... Here's the thing. If you go back in statute, all the cities used to have jails, right? And in Colorado, there's one city jail that's still of significance, and that's Aurora's city jail. So the cities have the ability to have their own jails. They just don't want them. They want to use the county jails, right? They want to raise money through their, because they only have two employees, the court, the municipal judge, and the municipal judge clerk. That's it. Pueblo America, 1 year when I did it, or right after I did it, $4 million is what they took in. $4 million for two employees. Pretty good business model, right? Yeah, they were mad. They're still mad.
Do they have their own jails now?
No. No, they're actually doing police work now, just like my guys. They're actually finding alternative resources for these people instead of booking them into county jail, right? They're taking them to detox. They're utilizing detox beds. They're taking them home in some case. They're doing community policing, which is what they're paid to do, which is what my guys are paid to do. Because at the time that I did it, my guys didn't bring anybody to the jail that was a municipal offender. State Patrol didn't do that. Only the municipality did. So unfortunately, they want to use the county infrastructure to generate resources for the city. I get it. Just can't do it if you got a 40-year-old jail that's overcrowded.
I'll say in Alabama, our Alabama State Police, the Alabama State Troopers, they don't serve warrants on those folks who don't come to court. And there are many, many thousands of those. Some of the counties, ours included, we started at least putting them in the NCIC so if somebody encountered them, they could be arrested. Today, if a trooper pulls over somebody on one of their old tickets they didn't come to court for, they will call us and say, come get your prisoner. And by the way, you need to tow their car in. We stopped them on a traffic stop. And we said, wait a minute, it's your case. We're just housing them for you. We're trying to get them in the justice system, but they'll say, sorry, we don't do that.
Let me add one more thing, and this is another thing you guys should look at in your communities. So, failure to pays, FTPs they call them, right? Failure to pays, right? So if the municipal ticket that they wrote them and they failed to appear in municipal court, they would get a warrant, a municipal warrant. Well, there was some debate as to whether or not I had to take warrants from municipalities, right? And so I said, okay, I'll take warrants from municipalities, but they're going to run in and out the door. I'll book them for purposes of booking, and out the door they go. Or you can come get them, city, municipality, and take them to your court before your magistrate, before your judge. I said, okay, great. So in Colorado, FTPs became a huge problem. I was like, didn't we get rid of debtor's prison like in the Middle Ages, right? So there was a legislative fix, the geniuses at the State House. They decided to outlaw FTPs. Great. Sheriffs were all in. We said, yay, we pushed for that legislation and it got passed. So no more failure to pays. We joined the Middle Ages. Guess what happened? Municipalities changed FTPs to what? Contempt of court. We gained nothing. But because people like you brought up the FTP debtor prison articles that were in the Chieftain and in the Denver Post and all across, yeah, it got some action from the legislature. Get rid of FTPs. Oh, they're bad. They didn't go anywhere. They're contempt of court violations. But it kind of quieted everybody down. Didn't change a thing. Take a look at those.
So I want to continue the conversation over lunch if we can, but I just have one very quick question since both of you, the two sheriffs, talked about how open you are to the press and press asking questions. What are your policies regarding media access to your facilities? Is there a national standard of the National Association of Sheriffs that sets any particular conditions on access? Just briefly, so
We don't have a national policy, but that's something we certainly encourage. The media having access to our jail, we certainly give tours, let them see our facilities. Again, they're our voice to the community. That's what you are. You can talk to a lot of people that we can't necessarily talk to on a daily basis, but giving access to the jail is something that's important for folks to see exactly how it operates, see what our deficiencies are, and you got to look at your own warts if you want to make things a little better.
Yeah, it depends on the reporters. I've only, in my 31 years, I've been ambushed a couple times. I didn't like it. So I still kind of take it out on you guys. But no, Colorado Public Radio's been in my jail. They've spent hours in my jail. I've had exposés in my jail. As long as we're not giving out, our safety and security issues or life safety issues with respect to our security apparatus, we're fine. We edit a little bit. Sometimes we'll take a pool reporter for all the stations instead of all three. It's just so cumbersome. But no, I'm very open and honest with the press. I'm told just a little too honest.
Okay, well, please join me in thanking a wonderful panel, and they will be available to talk with you during lunch. I hope you guys can join us for lunch, and so let's have a quick breather, and then we will reconvene here, and lunch is right there on your on my right, your left.